California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Paul Zellerbach is joining us today. He is the district attorney for Riverside County. We've spoken a bit about this conference before, but I believe it is so important to highlight because it's just a few months down the road.
Correct.
That is an anti-bullying conference being held in Riverside, but all are welcome. It's on October 22nd and 23rd. Very, kind of succinctly, tell us about the conference, and then we can talk about the particulars.
Okay. What we found recently is that bullying has unfortunately almost become an epidemic. We see it almost every day in our schools, at home, and now with the internet and with iPhones.
And I want to talk about cyberbullying.
We have cyberbullying as well. So we thought it was a good time to create a conference, a symposium, a 2-day seminar at the Riverside Convention Center where we can educate and raise awareness.
By the way, the revamped, renovated Riverside Convention Center.
And it's beautiful if you haven't been there.
Just so you know, and great restaurants nearby. I've been. Be that as it may, continue.
And so we thought it was a good time to bring all the partners together, psychologists, the medical field, the educators. This is being sponsored and co-partnered with us with Riverside Medical Clinic. And we think it's going to be a wonderful conference.
I want to talk about cyberbullying. I can't remember if I've told you this story, but very briefly, my daughter, who at the time was just starting 6th grade, we had just gotten her a phone, and she was a victim of what some would say was relatively minor cyberbullying. It was a fellow student of hers that was just bombarding her with text messages, a lot of emoticons. My daughter, who is a pretty strong kid, became completely unglued right before my eyes. It would have been easier for her to have a verbal dispute with this student than to receive these angry face emoticons. She did not know what to do. It turned into a 2-week adventure with the school, the parents. It was a disaster.
And you've hit the nail on the head, Brad. That's the problem. The kids themselves and their parents, and oftentimes educators or teachers, don't know how to respond. They don't know what to do. And so the kids invariably start responding back on the phones or on the internet, and that just aggravates the situation and makes it worse.
It was stunning on so many levels. And what was also particularly frustrating during the process is, and correct me if I'm wrong, the law is somewhat vague on whether and how schools should intervene when cyberbullying occurs off campus. This initial flurry of cyberbullying, it occurred on a Sunday. We were in a car, the student was not on campus. We brought the school in. My daughter happens to go to an independent school, so the laws are even more vague than if she was at a public school, but what do you do?
Well, what we found is that, first of all, it's an awareness issue. The kids have to make the parents aware, the school aware, so we can identify the bully and deal with it and intervene and start counseling, start intervening at an earlier stage. And again, studies have found that 160,000 children every year don't go to school because of fear of bullying. 75% of the shooting incidents that have occurred on our schools throughout this nation started with cyberbullying in some form or another.
Let's talk about recently what happened at UCSB. It could have been UCR.
Sure.
It could have been Cal State San Bernardino. We had a kid who, you look at him, seemed bright, not bad looking, and he became completely unglued as a result of his perceived rejection, ostracization. Did I say that word correctly?
Yes.
But you know what I'm getting at.
And that's why you need to intervene at the earliest stage possible. And that's what this symposium is hopefully going to do. It's going to raise awareness. It's going to demonstrate what resources are out there and available to the kids, to the bullies themselves, to the students, to the educators.
The thing that's most frustrating for me, both as a former high school student and now as a parent of a junior high school student, it just seems, even today, physical bullying, schools jump right on it. There's no question. If there's any physical contact, all breaks loose. Verbal, cyber, there's still this sense, sticks and stones, and to me, those are more damaging.
Well, they can be, certainly. And we're seeing a generational gap. Because a lot of parents and grandparents weren't raised and didn't attend school when we had the internet and the iPhones and cell phones and things like that. So they're not as sensitive to it. They don't appreciate and understand the significance of all the websites that these people can go to conduct their cyberbullying. It's just not necessarily communicating with the victim or the individual themselves, but it's spreading information out there about that person on the internet.
But why is society still so, in my opinion, blind to the lasting pain of non-physical bullying? Quick anecdote. I met this gentleman, and we're adults when we meet, and he tells me he's from New Rochelle, New York. That's where my cousin's from. And I said my cousin's name. He said, when we were 9 years old, your cousin stood up for me in front of the bullies. I asked my cousin, he didn't have a clue what he was talking about. But that moment was so powerful for him because someone stood up. And again, the bully, it was all verbal. And yet we still seem to be blind to the power of the word, the power of the emoticon.
Well, I think, again, it's an awareness issue and catching up. We're always behind. Certainly the law is behind, as you pointed out, in catching up with cyberbullying and its ramifications or repercussions. I know of a situation in another county up north where a girl committed suicide because the cyberbullying pushed her over the edge.
Oh, yeah.
And I've talked to
it's
her
a common
parents.
story. I've also become aware, and again, an anecdote is not proof, and it doesn't mean that it happens all the time. I personally know of a situation where the parent was doubling as the child on the iPhone and was cyberbullying other children.
And they do that. They portray themselves as someone else or as the victim themselves, and that's what makes the internet and cyberbullying so dangerous and so powerful.
Imagine a parent. I mean, it's one thing to live vicariously through your cheerleading daughter, but to literally be the bully themselves. I mean, this mother, I saw it, I knew it. I mean, she was the bully.
It's not surprising.
So what do you hope to get out of this conference? What do you hope to portray to the attendants?
Well, I think, first of all, the conference is almost full. And we're still in July, and this isn't until October. So I think that is a good indicator of what the need is out there. But I think we're hoping to raise awareness, to get the different groups together, the educators, the psychologists, the law enforcement itself with school resource officers who are available, and get them on the same page.
I feel like the law is often not on the same page. No insult intended, because I do feel as if quite often, again, it's this whole notion of unless there's physical violence, the law doesn't get involved.
Well, we're trying to do a better job at that. And again, the law is always trying to catch up with technology. And we're always behind in that curve. But nonetheless, I think people and even educators aren't aware of all the aspects of the law that we can employ. Threatening, harassment.
So what do you do? I mean, back to the situation with my daughter. She was in an independent school. If there's cyberbullying at a public school in Riverside County, what happens?
It makes no difference if it's a public school or
really?
private school. Once we're notified, once law enforcement is notified, we can intervene right then and there.
And at what level, what has to be in that text message to reach the level of cyberbullying to the extent that law enforcement gets involved?
I think the person who receives that text message has to be somehow threatened or somehow offended or become fearful, and it crosses the line.
Are you getting these cases?
We are getting these cases, unfortunately, more and more of them.
And what are you doing with them?
Well, we're prosecuting them.
You are. Who's prosecuted? The child, the parent, both?
No, right now, so far, we've just been prosecuting the child, the minor.
Diversion programs, presumably.
Diversion programs, obviously, intervention, so we're also trying to start a mentor program for the bully and the victim.
His name is Paul Zellerbach. He is the DA for Riverside County. The conference October 22nd and 23rd in Riverside. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's California Edition.